She bragged about her husband's riches all night until the waiter handed me the bill. The clinking glasses, the polished silverware, the smug little smile on her face. I thought I knew how this dinner would end. But the truth landed on that table harder than any plate of food. This isn't just a story about money. It's about pride, illusion, and the moment reality cuts through the performance. It all began the moment she invited me to dinner. The message came on a Wednesday afternoon, completely unexpected. Vanessa. Her name flashed across my phone screen, and for a moment I just stared at it. It had been years long enough for me to forget the sound of her laugh, but not long enough to forget the way she always made me feel. Like I was being measured, weighed, and found just a little too ordinary. We weren't exactly friends. More like acquaintances caught in the orbit of each other's lives. We met through mutual connections, and back then, I often left our interactions with that strange aftertaste of polite exhaustion. With Vanessa, nothing was ever casual. Every coffee date was a performance. Every conversation was a competition. Every outfit, every sentence was curated for effect. And now, out of the blue, her name was glowing on my phone. I hesitated before opening the message, but curiosity always wins with me. It read, "Dinner, Friday night. You'll love this place. Only the best it's where my husband and I usually go." Short, clipped, not even a question mark, just an expectation. I should have smiled politely, maybe even felt a flicker of nostalgia. But instead, something in me recoiled. This wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. Still, I typed back, "Sure, what time?" Her reply was instant, almost like she'd been waiting for me to submit. 8 p.m. Dress well, the restaurant has standards, my husband insists. I read the words twice, then a third time, as if maybe the tone would change. It didn't. It wasn't enough to meet her. I had to dress for her husband's imagined judgment. I had to walk into their world already underlined by conditions. And I wondered why me? Why now? It had been so long since we'd spoken, and the Vanessa I remembered wasn't the type to randomly reconnect without a reason. No, with her, everything was deliberate, calculated, a move in a game I never quite agreed to play. For the next 2 days, the thought of Friday night sat heavy on me. I tried to convince myself it was just dinner, that maybe she'd changed, that maybe she just wanted to catch up. But deep down, I knew better. With Vanessa, there was always a motive. By the time Friday arrived, I'd already run through a dozen excuses in my head, reasons to cancel, ways to politely decline. But in the end, I didn't. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was pride, or maybe it was that small part of me that wanted to see her world up close, to hear in her own words just how much she'd built her life around her husband's wealth. So I went. As I stood in front of my closet that evening, I felt a pang of pressure I didn't want to admit. I heard her words again. Dress well, the restaurant has standards. My husband insists. I pulled out a dress I hadn't worn in years. Simple, black, timeless, not expensive, but not plain either. I told myself it was enough. I wasn't going to compete. I wasn't going to perform. I wasn't there to match her. But even as I slipped into the dress and fastened the clasp at my neck, I felt it, the pull, the weight of her expectation pressing on me from a distance. On the drive over, I rehearsed little pep talks in my head. Be yourself. Don't let her get under your skin. Smile when you need to, stay quiet when you must. But my stomach still twisted as I pulled up to the restaurant she had chosen. The place was everything I expected, glass walls glowing with golden light. A valet stand out front with luxury cars purring in a perfect line, and a doorman who glanced at me the way one sizes up an unfamiliar brand. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and whispered to myself, "You don't have to match her, just be you." But I already knew the truth. This dinner wasn't about food. It wasn't even about me. It was about her, her image, her power, her endless need to display a life polished to perfection, even if it cracked underneath. And I was walking straight into it. As I handed my keys to the valet and stepped onto the marble walkway, I realized something with a chill of certainty. The performance had already begun, and it would only get louder once I sat down. The moment I stepped through the glass doors, I knew this place wasn't really a restaurant, it was a theater. Everything gleamed. The marble floors shone as if someone had polished them after every single step. The chandeliers overhead looked like frozen waterfalls, dripping with crystal and casting golden light across the room. Even the air smelled curated, an expensive blend of perfume, wine, and something floral that didn't come from any natural flower I'd ever known. It wasn't just about eating here, it was about being seen here. A hostess in a sleek black dress met me at the door, her smile trained and perfect. She didn't even need to ask who I was meeting. She just glanced at her tablet, then at me, and in a voice so soft it was almost rehearsed, said, "Right this way." Her heels clicked against the marble as she led me past velvet ropes that separated the lounge from the main dining room. I could feel eyes on me as I walked, not hostile but curious, evaluating. The kind of stares that silently asked, "Do you belong here?" I smoothed my dress, reminded myself to hold my head high, and told myself not to shrink, even though everything about this place screamed that it wasn't built for people like me. And then I saw her, Vanessa. She was sitting in the corner booth like a queen at her throne, positioned perfectly so that anyone who entered the restaurant could see her. Her back was straight, her hair perfectly styled, her hand wrapped casually around the stem of a crystal champagne flute. She didn't look like she was having dinner. She looked like she was posing for the cover of a lifestyle magazine. Her outfit was curated down to the smallest detail. A designer dress that shimmered under the light, a necklace that sparkled like it belonged in a glass case, a watch on her wrist that probably cost more than my car. Everything about her screamed wealth, but not the quiet kind. It was wealth meant to be flaunted, meant to be paraded. The moment she spotted me, her lips stretched into a wide smile. It wasn't warm. It wasn't the smile of someone happy to see an old friend. It was the smile of someone who was about to show off. "Darling," she exclaimed, rising just enough to air kiss me on both cheeks. The scent of her perfume was so thick it wrapped around me, suffocating, expensive in a way that almost felt aggressive. "I'm so glad you came. You'll adore this place. It's where my husband and I always dine. Always." She dragged out the word like it was a badge of honor. Not once, not sometimes, always. I slid into the booth across from her, already feeling like I was an unwilling participant in a performance I hadn't agreed to watch. Vanessa didn't waste a second. She didn't ask me how I'd been. She didn't ask about my work, my family, or even why I'd agreed to meet her. From the moment I sat down, she began a monologue that had clearly been rehearsed. Her voice carried across the table, and maybe even across the room, lilting and precise, meant to be heard by more than just me. She spoke of her husband's success, their vacations in Europe, the private chef they'd recently hired. She mentioned their new home in the hills and how the renovations were taking longer than expected. Because good marble is hard to source these days, every word was a thread woven into the tapestry of her supposed perfect life. "This wine," she said, swirling the champagne in her glass, "isn't even on the menu. The sommelier brings it in just for us. My husband knows the vineyard owner personally. Connections are everything, you know." She smiled, expecting me to marvel, but I only nodded. I'd never heard of the vineyard, nor did I care. Still, she kept going, her words rolling over me like waves. What struck me most wasn't what she said, but how she said it. Her sentences were punctuated with little pauses, just long enough for nearby tables to catch them. Her eyes darted around the room every so often, checking to see who was watching, who was listening. It became clear to me then, these words weren't meant for me. I was just a prop, a mirror to reflect her performance. The waiter appeared at our table with menus, but Vanessa waved him away with a flick of her hand. "No need for menus," she declared. "I'll order for us. My husband insists I try everything when we come here, and I know exactly what's best." I smiled politely, though irritation tugged at me. I wanted to tell her that maybe I'd like to choose for myself, but I kept quiet. After all, this wasn't about me. This wasn't even about dinner. It was about her stage. As she leaned forward, her bracelets jingling softly, she lowered her voice, just enough to sound conspiratorial but loud enough for anyone passing by to hear. "It's so important to surround yourself with people who understand this kind of lifestyle. My husband always says wealth isn't just money, it's presence, it's influence." I forced another smile, but my thoughts were louder than my words. Then why invite me? I sat there, nodding, sipping water I hadn't ordered, realizing with each passing second that this evening was carefully choreographed. The clothes, the jewelry, the way she chose this corner table, where she could be seen from every angle, none of it was accidental. And suddenly it hit me. I hadn't been invited as a friend. I hadn't even been invited as company. I had been invited as an audience, and soon Vanessa would turn her spotlight directly onto me. It didn't take long before the spotlight turned, just like I knew it would. Vanessa leaned back against the leather booth, her champagne glass poised like a prop, her eyes fixed on me with that calculating glimmer I remembered all too well. She smiled sweetly, but I could feel the trap in it. So she began, tilting her head in mock curiosity. "What are you doing with yourself these days?" Her tone was casual, but the question wasn't innocent. With Vanessa, nothing ever was. I told her briefly about my job, about how I was working steadily and managing just fine. I kept it simple, but she wanted details. She wanted numbers. She wanted ammunition. "And your apartment?" she pressed, "still in that little place near downtown? Must be cozy." The way she stretched that word made it sound less like a compliment and more like an insult wrapped in silk. I forced a smile. "It's comfortable. It's home." She nodded, her eyes sparkling, as though she'd just scored a point in a game only she was playing. "Well, that's nice. My husband says a home should always reflect success. That's why we renovated the second property, imported marble in the bathrooms, custom chandeliers, the works. You'd be amazed how much the little things matter." I nodded politely, though the weight of her words pressed down like stones. It wasn't enough for her to brag. She needed to contrast. She needed to remind me of the distance between her world and mine. She shifted the conversation again, this time to vacations. "We just came back from the Amalfi Coast," she said, her hand fluttering in the air as though she could still smell the sea breeze. "The villas there are spectacular, private chefs, yacht charters. My husband wouldn't have it any other way." "When was the last time you traveled?" I hesitated because the truth was nothing that could compete. I mentioned a short trip I had taken a year ago, something modest but meaningful to me. She blinked once, twice, before giving me a sympathetic smile that dripped with pity. "Oh, how quaint," she said softly, as if she were patting a child on the head. Every answer I gave became another opportunity for her to elevate herself, to highlight the gulf between us. My job was steady, but her husband was brilliant. My home was comfortable, but her estates were grand. My trip was quaint, but hers were luxurious. It was a dance I hadn't agreed to, yet here I was being led by her every word. But the more she spoke, the more I began to notice something strange. The cracks in her performance weren't obvious, but they were there. Each story circled back not to her, but to him, her husband. Every achievement, every luxury, every detail of her life was anchored to what he provided. She wasn't building herself up, she was being built up, brick by brick, with someone else's wealth. And she clung to those bricks as if without them she'd collapse. I sipped my water, listening, nodding when required, but inside my thoughts were sharper, clearer. For all her comparisons, for all her attempts to make me feel small, I couldn't shake the question, rising louder in my mind. If her life was so perfect, why did it feel so rehearsed? Why did she need me here to witness it? Her smile widened again as she reached across the table, tapping her manicured nails against the wood. "You know," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "it's admirable how you manage with so little. Honestly, I don't know how you do it. My husband says not everyone is cut out for this lifestyle, but I think you've done well given your circumstances." The words stung, but I swallowed them, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Let her think she was winning. Let her think she was the queen on her throne. Because the truth was, I knew something she didn't. Every performance has an ending, and hers was coming faster than she realized. As she called the waiter over to order, her voice rising just loud enough to be heard across the room, I sat back in silence, letting her bask in her performance. But deep down, I already sensed the shift that was coming. Because the food wasn't just a meal, it was the next act in her show. The waiter appeared at our table with a quiet elegance, menus in hand, ready to describe the chef's specials for the evening. But before he could even open his mouth, Vanessa lifted her hand with a dismissive flick of her wrist. It was such a small movement, yet it carried the weight of command. The kind of gesture that said, "I don't need options, I make decisions." "No menus for us," she said, her voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I'll handle everything." The waiter, calm and professional, didn't bat an eye. Clearly, this wasn't the first time he had dealt with someone like her. He simply took out his notepad, pen poised, and waited. Vanessa straightened in her seat, tilting her chin upward, ready to deliver. What I quickly realized wasn't an order at all, it was a declaration. "We'll start with oysters," she said, drawing out the word as though savoring it. 2 dozen on ice. Make sure they're fresh. The largest you have. Nothing too small. My husband insists on size when it comes to oysters." I blinked at her phrasing, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from smirking. She didn't notice. She was in full performance mode. "And the truffle risotto," she continued. "Yes, the chef knows exactly how we like it. Extra truffle shavings on top. No one in this city does it better. My husband simply won't eat risotto anywhere else." The waiter scribbled silently, nodding once. Vanessa wasn't done. "Of course, we'll need the wagyu, medium rare, sliced for sharing. And don't bring me the regular wagyu eye, want the A5. I'll know the difference. Oh, and do add the lobster tail. The main lobster, not the smaller one. And tell the chef to prepare it exactly as usual. Hell no. The waiter didn't flinch, didn't interrupt, didn't even look surprised. He simply wrote, the pen moving in smooth strokes, as though he'd recorded this exact order dozens of times before. And for wine, Vanessa added, as though it were an afterthought. She tapped her manicured nail against the crystal flute already in front of her. Open the 98 Bordeaux, the reserve. My husband insists we drink only the best vintages. I glanced at her, my lips pressed together in a polite half-smile. But my mind was racing. I'd never heard someone order with so much certainty and so little care. Not once did she glance at me. Not once did she ask what I liked. It wasn't about feeding us. It was about feeding her narrative. When the waiter finally bowed his head and walked away, Vanessa leaned back with a triumphant sigh, her bracelets jingling softly as she crossed her arms. The diamonds around her neck caught the candlelight and threw tiny sparks across the table. She looked pleased, like an artist who had just signed her masterpiece. "You're going to love it," she said, her eyes glittering. "My husband always tells me, if you're going to do something, do it extravagantly. Never half measure." I nodded faintly, though her words made my stomach twist. Extravagant wasn't the word I would have chosen. Excessive, maybe. Wasteful, definitely. But I stayed silent. I'd already realized by now that my role tonight wasn't to eat or to enjoy, it was to witness. Soon, the procession began. First came the oysters, glistening on a bed of crushed ice, their shells curved like tiny silver bowls. A small dish of lemon wedges and horseradish sat to the side, untouched, unnecessary in Vanessa's eyes. She took one, tipped it back effortlessly, and gave a satisfied nod as though she had just judged a competition and the oyster had passed. Then came the risotto, its creamy surface blanketed with thin slices of black truffle. The aroma filled the air, thick and earthy, clinging to the candle smoke. I took a spoonful out of politeness, but the richness coated my tongue so heavily it felt more like a burden than a treat. Vanessa barely touched hers, content with one delicate bite, before setting the spoon aside. Next came the wagyu, its marbling so intricate it looked like lace woven through the meat. It was sliced and arranged in perfect lines across a dark stone platter, the juices glistening under the warm lights. Vanessa cut a small piece, chewed thoughtfully, then dabbed at her lips with her napkin. "Oh, you'll never find beef like this anywhere else," she said matter-of-factly. "My husband says once you've had A5, everything else tastes like dog food." I smiled politely, though a sharp thought passed through my mind. How would you know if every opinion belongs to him? Finally, the lobster tail arrived, its shell split open, the meat glistening with butter. It was decadent, indulgent, almost absurd. Vanessa took a bite and sighed dramatically, as if the dish had given her life itself. But just like the risotto, she abandoned it after a few mouthfuls, moving her attention back to her champagne. As the table filled with untouched food, I realized what this really was. It wasn't dinner. It wasn't about hunger. It wasn't even about taste. This was theater. The oysters, the risotto, the beef, the lobster, they weren't meant to be consumed. They were meant to be displayed. They were props in Vanessa's ongoing production, proof of a wealth she wanted everyone to believe was hers. I picked at my food quietly, each bite heavy, while she continued her monologue. "Most people," she said, her tone lowering just enough to sound conspiratorial, "will never experience this. They work their whole lives for scraps. But me, my husband makes sure I never want for anything. Not food, not clothes, not money, nothing." Her eyes fixed on mine, her lips curling into that sharp little smile. "And honestly," she asked, almost daring me to disagree, "isn't that what every woman dreams of?" Her question hung in the air, thick and cloying like the truffle oil on the risotto. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because the truth was already forming in my mind, clear as crystal. She wanted me to envy her. She wanted me to shrink beside her mountain of excess. But all I felt was the weight of her illusion pressing down between us. And beneath it all a thought pulsed steady and certain. This couldn't last. It never does. And I was right, because the real test of her performance wasn't in the oysters, the wagyu, or the lobster. The real test was waiting for her at the end of the meal, inside a small leather folder that the waiter would eventually place on our table. And when that folder landed, her entire illusion would shatter in an instant. By the time the plates were cleared, the table looked less like the aftermath of dinner and more like the remains of a lavish banquet no one had truly enjoyed. The oysters glistened in their shells, half sucked and forgotten. The risotto, once steaming and perfumed with truffle, had cooled into a heavy clump, the shaved truffle curling on top like discarded ribbons. The wagyu platter sat nearly untouched, slices of meat drying under the dim glow of the candlelight, while the lobster tail, cracked and dripping with butter, had been abandoned after only 2 bites. The tablecloth bore faint stains wine droplets, a smear of butter, a drizzle of sauce, and yet Vanessa sat in the middle of it all like a queen upon her throne. She leaned back against the leather booth, her posture relaxed, her lips curled into a satisfied smile. The stem of her crystal glass balanced lightly between her fingers as she swirled the last of her Bordeaux. She looked utterly content. But me? I felt the tension building like a storm rolling in, the kind you can smell before it breaks. I had known all night this moment was coming. I had sat there through her endless bragging, her sharp little digs, her carefully rehearsed lines about her husband's wealth and her perfect life, waiting. Because I knew there was only one way this performance could end. And then I saw it. The waiter, tall and elegant, approached from the corner of the room. His steps were measured, his face unreadable, but in his hands, tucked neatly under his arm, was the inevitable, a small leather folder. He placed it on the table between us with practiced grace, his bow polite, his tone neutral. "Whenever you're ready," he said. I swear, in that moment, the sound of the entire restaurant faded. The clinking glasses, the low murmur of voices, the hum of background music, it all fell away. All I could hear was the quiet thud of that folder landing on the table. I looked at Vanessa. Her hand didn't move. Her eyes didn't even flick toward it. She took another sip of her wine as though nothing had happened, as though the concept of a bill was entirely foreign to her. Seconds stretched into silence. The waiter stood at a discreet distance, but I could feel his presence lingering, waiting. My stomach twisted as I sat there, staring at the folder, waiting for her to reach out, to claim it, to do what anyone in her position would naturally do. But she didn't. Finally, I cleared my throat. My voice sounded too loud, even though I spoke softly. "Vanessa," I began, "are you going to?" She waved her hand dismissively, her eyes never leaving her glass. "Oh, I'm sure you don't mind handling it. My husband will reimburse you later. He always insists that friends contribute." The words hit me like a slap. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. She said it so casually, so smoothly, as if she had rehearsed even this moment. But the venom in it wasn't lost on me. I reached for the folder with trembling hands. my fingers brushing against the soft leather. Slowly, I opened it, and there it was, the truth laid bare in numbers. The total glared up at me, bold and unapologetic. A figure so high it made my chest tighten, a total that could pay my rent for 2 months, cover my bills, even stock my pantry for weeks. My pulse quickened as I scanned the list: oysters, wagyu, lobster, truffle risotto, Bordeaux Reserve. Every extravagant dish she had ordered without hesitation, every indulgence she had barely touched, now sat on that paper demanding to be paid. By me. I lifted my gaze, my throat dry, and looked at her. Vanessa didn't flinch. She didn't look embarrassed or apologetic. No, her smile widened. She rested her chin lightly on her hand, her elbow propped on the table, her rings catching the light. She looked like a cat watching a cornered mouse, amused by its panic. For a long, excruciating moment, I couldn't speak. My tongue felt heavy, my anger rising like a tide I could barely hold back. I wanted to slam the folder shut. I wanted to shout. But the restaurant was watching. Even if they weren't looking directly at us, I felt the weight of their stares. And that was exactly what Vanessa wanted. She thrived on it. The waiter lingered a few feet away, professional but tense, his eyes flicking between the two of us. He knew what was happening. He'd probably seen it before. This little game of power, this quiet humiliation, played out under chandeliers and over fine wine. Finally, I found my voice. "You want me to pay for this?" Her eyes sparkled, her lips curving into a sly smile. "Darling," she said, drawing out the word like honey, "don't be so dramatic. My husband insists we treat dinners as shared experiences. Besides, you should be grateful you got to enjoy an evening most people could only dream of. Money comes and goes, but memories." She lifted her empty glass in a mock toast. "Memories last forever." I stared at her, my hands gripping the folder so tightly my knuckles whitened. Grateful? That was what she thought I should feel? Grateful? After hours of enduring her endless bragging, her constant reminders of everything I supposedly lacked, she expected me to thank her for leaving me with a bill I couldn't afford. Heat rose in my chest, sharp and choking. Every word she had spoken that night echoed in my head. My husband insists. My husband provides. My husband says. My husband, my husband, my husband. It was all him. All borrowed wealth. All illusion. And here she was, proving the truth of it. For all her bragging, for all her glitter and shine, when it came down to it, he wasn't paying. She wasn't capable. Her mask was slipping, and I could see it now. She didn't invite me here to impress me. She invited me here to use me, to prop up her image for another night, at my expense. I closed the folder slowly, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the clink of glasses around us. Vanessa tilted her head, her smile still smug, but for the first time, I saw something else flicker across her face. A shadow, a twitch of unease. Because she knew I had seen through her performance. She knew her illusion had cracked. And in that instant, beneath the glow of chandeliers and the weight of her arrogance, I realized the truth. Her wealth wasn't hers. Her power wasn't real. And without her husband, without someone else to carry the burden, she had nothing. For the first time all night, it wasn't me who looked small. It was her, and she felt it too. My fingers pressed against the leather folder, the numbers still screaming at me from inside. For a moment, I didn't speak. I just let the silence hang between us, heavy and suffocating, letting her sit in it. Vanessa shifted in her seat, still swirling her empty glass of wine as though the last drop might save her. The smile on her lips remained, but it wavered just enough for me to see the truth, lurking underneath. "Vanessa," I said quietly, my voice low but steady, "if your husband is as wealthy as you say he is, then why aren't you handling this?" The question landed harder than I expected. For the first time that night, she didn't have a sharp, rehearsed answer ready. She blinked once, twice, her eyes flicking toward the waiter, who still lingered nearby with professional patience. Her shoulders tensed, and I saw her fingers toy nervously with the edge of her napkin. "It's not that simple," she whispered finally, leaning forward as though confessing a secret meant only for me. Her voice dropped into something softer, weaker, stripped of its earlier bravado. "You know how men are. My husband doesn't like me using our cards without his approval. He manages all of that. I don't bother with it." I stared at her, unblinking. She rushed to fill the silence. "He gives me an allowance," she added quickly, as though the word would patch the hole in her story. "It's generous, of course, more than most women ever see, but I can't use it for things like this. He'd be furious if he saw a charge like this on the account." Allowance. The word clung to the air like a foul stench. I raised an eyebrow, but I stayed quiet, letting her continue. She tugged at her bracelet nervously, the diamonds on her wrist glittering in the light, but her movements betraying a frantic edge. "He doesn't want me to worry about money," she went on, her words tumbling too fast now. "He says it's better that way, that it's stressful, unnecessary. He wants me to be carefree, to enjoy myself without thinking about the boring details." Her tone grew defensive, as if she could hear how absurd it sounded even as she said it. She laughed lightly, the sound brittle, cracking at the edges. "Has very protective. He doesn't like me swiping cards around town without him knowing. He says it's not safe. He prefers to keep track of everything. That's love, right? That's what a good husband does." But her eyes darted toward me, searching desperately for approval, for some flicker of agreement that would make her words feel true. I said nothing. Her voice grew smaller. "I mean, honestly, if I had the cards with me, I still couldn't. He checks the statements every day. He'd ask why I spent so much. He'd demand to know who I was with, what it was for. And he hates surprises, hates them. He always says if I don't approve it, it doesn't happen." Her fingers were shaking now. She gripped her champagne glass as though it could anchor her, though it was empty. Her polished nails tapped against the glass, sharp little clicks that betrayed the panic building beneath her perfect mask. I leaned back slowly, watching her unravel piece by piece. The woman who had sat there for hours bragging about private chefs and Italian villas was suddenly scrambling, stacking flimsy excuses like cards in a tower ready to collapse. And with every word, the cracks spread wider. She laughed again, this time too high-pitched, too forced. "Don't get me wrong, he's generous, so generous. He buys me whatever I want. The clothes, the jewelry, the trips, they're all mine. But things like this?" She gestured toward the folder with a dismissive flick of her hand. No, he'd never let me pay. He says it's a man's role, he insists." I could almost hear the script falling apart as she spoke. Each excuse contradicted the last, each justification weaker than the one before. She was stammering now, her confidence leaking out of her like water from a cracked vase. And I saw it clearly, the truth she had been hiding behind all night. Her wealth wasn't real. Her power wasn't hers. Every ounce of luxury she paraded came stamped with her husband's name. She lived on borrowed riches, bound by invisible chains, disguised as diamonds and silk. And she didn't even have the dignity of control. She didn't own her cards. She didn't touch her accounts. She didn't even choose when she could spend money. She was caged, gilded and polished, but caged all the same. I let her keep talking, her words stumbling over each other, piling higher, messier, more desperate. She told me about the times she tried to buy a gift for a friend, only to have him scold her for wasting money. She told me how every receipt had to be explained, every purchase justified. "It's love," she repeated, clinging to the word like a drowning woman clings to driftwood. "He just doesn't want me to stress." But her eyes betrayed her. Her hands betrayed her. And the cracks in her mask were too wide to ignore now. She was powerless. All of her grandeur, all of her bragging, it was smoke, carefully blown in my direction to distract me from the fact that she wasn't holding the match. He was, and for the first time all night, I didn't feel small sitting across from her. I didn't feel inadequate or envious or resentful. I felt pity. And pity, I realized, was the last thing she wanted. The silence stretched again. Her excuses ran out, her smile faltered completely, and all that was left was the truth hanging heavy in the air between us. And I made a decision. I wasn't about to let her trap me quietly. The folder sat between us like a live grenade, its leather edges worn from years of quiet explosions just like this. I could feel the weight of it pressing against my fingertips, a silent demand that I bend, that I play along, that I be the audience and the financier of Vanessa's one-woman show. For a heartbeat, I considered it the easier choice, the quieter choice, the one that would end this evening without further spectacle. But something inside me refused. I had listened to her brag for hours. I had swallowed the little jabs dressed up as compliments, the comparisons meant to cut me down. I had watched her drown herself in wine and lobster and smugness, all while reminding me again and again of how much better her life was than mine. But now when it mattered, she had nothing, and for once, I wasn't going to let her use me as a prop in her performance. I straightened in my seat, folded the bill open once more, and kept my eyes on the page until the tremor in my chest steadied. Then I looked at her. My voice came out calm, clear, and sharper than I intended. "I'll cover my share," I said. "The glass of wine, the salad, and my entree. That's it." The air between us snapped. Vanessa blinked, her painted lashes fluttering like wings caught in a storm. For a moment, she didn't move. Her smile froze in place, a mask caught mid-performance. The words seemed to hang in the air, louder than I'd spoken them, echoing off the chandeliers and polished silverware. You can't be serious," she hissed finally, her voice breaking into something shrill and uneven. She leaned across the table, her perfume flooding the space between us, and lowered her voice to a furious whisper. "Don't do this. Not here, not in front of them." Her eyes flicked nervously to the tables nearby. A couple at the next booth had paused their conversation. The waiter hovered a polite distance away, but his glance was sharper now, attentive. The walls of her performance were closing in, and she knew it. I kept my tone even, unshaken. "I'm not doing anything to you, Vanessa. I'm doing something for myself. I didn't order the oysters. I didn't order the lobster. I didn't order 3 bottles of wine. That was you. I'll pay for what I ate. Nothing more." Her composure cracked further. Her hand shot across the table, gripping my wrist tightly, her manicured nails biting into my skin. "Please," she whispered harshly, her words trembling with desperation. "Do you have any idea how this makes me look? If people see me fumbling over a bill, they'll think I'm lying. They'll think my husband isn't who I say he is. They'll think I don't belong here." I pulled my hand gently but firmly out of her grasp. The tremor in her voice was real now. the confidence of hours ago gone like smoke. She was scrambling, clawing for control. But the more she tried, the more transparent she became. "Vanessa," I said quietly, "then do what you always say you can. Call your husband. Have him cover it." Her face drained of color. The diamond earrings glinting against her cheeks seemed cruel in that moment, mocking her as her lips parted soundlessly. For the first time that evening, she didn't have a single word ready. Not a quip, not a boast, not even a half-hearted excuse. Just silence. I held her gaze, refusing to flinch. Around us, the restaurant had shifted. The murmurs felt quieter, the clink of glass sharper, as though everyone sensed the shift in power at our table. For so long Vanessa had filled the air with her voice, her stories, her laughter pitched too high. But now it was gone, and the silence was deafening. She tried again, her voice trembling this time. Don't put me in this position. You don't understand. He doesn't like when I call him about things like this. He'll get angry. He'll ask why I was out without him. He'll ask why I ordered so much." Her eyes darted down to the bill, then back up to me, pleading, "He'll make it my fault." Her words tumbled out in a rush, and in that moment, I saw it all clearly. The cage, the leash, the way her supposed riches were nothing more than shackles wrapped in velvet. She wasn't free. She wasn't powerful. She wasn't rich. She was trapped. But even knowing that, even seeing the truth written all over her panicked face, I couldn't let her pull me into her cage with her. "Vanessa," I said softly but firmly, "this isn't my burden. I won't carry it for you." Her eyes widened, glistening with something that might have been anger, might have been fear. Her lips trembled, as though she wanted to scream. But no sound came out. She looked around again, at the curious stares of strangers, at the waiter now walking toward us with careful steps, at Miss Steady, unflinching. And then it happened. Her mask, the one she had worn so flawlessly since the moment I walked through the door, shattered. The polished queen with the diamonds and the stories and the endless bragging was gone. In her place sat a woman, cornered, fragile, desperate to maintain an illusion that had slipped too far from her grasp. And I knew in that moment nothing would ever be the same. Her breath hitched the way it does right before a person cries, but refuses to let the first tear fall. She reached for her glass and found it empty, her hand hovering there in midair like she'd forgotten how to complete the gesture. When she set it down, the base kissed the tablecloth with a tiny, embarrassed sound. The restaurant kept humming around us, but at our table, the air had thinned to a thread. "I can't call him," she said at last, barely above a whisper. "Not for this." "Why not?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "If the wealth is his and everything you order is ours, then why not ask him to take responsibility for the bill?" Her throat worked before the words came. "Because he'll ask where I am, why I'm here, why I'm not home. He'll say I'm showing off. He'll say I did this to provoke him to embarrass him. He'll say this is exactly why he doesn't put the cards in my name." She paused, and the admission undid her posture by an inch. "He'll say I can't be trusted." The word trusted floated between us like a bruise. She toyed with a napkin corner until a little ridge formed, then flattened, then formed again. "How much of your life is permission?" I asked quietly. She flinched like the question had heat. Most of it. The truth started to leak in short, broken lines. "He sets her allowance every month and reviews the statements every morning. She has a card, but it is a household card: groceries, cleaners, florals, small safe purchases that advertise domestic stability. Travel is approved, Wardrobe is escorted, gifts are guided. There was a time she tried to surprise him for his birthday. The flowers were too showy, the dinner too noisy, the charge not aligned with our aesthetic. He moved the majority of accounts out of her sight after that. "It's just easier," he'd said, "so you don't have to worry." She offered the explanations like someone trying to square a circle. "He says he's protecting me from scams, from mistakes, from people who might take advantage." Then her voice dipped. "He also says if I were smarter about money, he wouldn't have to." "Does he give you cash?" I asked. "Sometimes," she said. "In an envelope. If I'm going out with the wives." She swallowed. "But he likes me to bring back the change." She let out a small laugh, but it broke on the edges and died straight away. The diamonds in her ears caught the candlelight and threw sparks across her cheekbones, pretty, precise, and pitiless. The waiter approached with the weightless tread of someone trained to pass through other people's storms without getting wet. He didn't speak. He only offered the smallest nod, checking if the table had remembered how to breathe. I met his eyes and gave him a tiny shake of the head. Not yet. He glided away. Vanessa's hands were restless now, gathering and smoothing, arranging and correcting, as if order could be restored by aligning cutlery. "You don't get it," she said, a spark of the old bravado, flaring and failing in the same breath. "This is how it works. There's a level where you don't handle money. The house does, the office does, the accountants do. If I started paying for dinners and calling Ubers and swiping at boutiques, it would all look." She searched for the word and found the worst one: cheap. "Cheap," I repeated softly, "like living within reach." Her eyes flicked up to mine and then away, helpless to hold. "He says autonomy is chaos dressed as freedom. He says women mistake independence for safety. He says the safest place for a woman is in a home a man can afford." "On his terms," I said. She pressed her lips together, the tiniest nod. "On his terms." Silence again. Not the sharp silence of anger. This one was soft, heavy, resigned. The kind that shows up after belief cracks, and the light that comes through doesn't look like mercy. "When did the bragging start?" I asked. "Before the rules or after?" "After," she whispered. "You get loud when you're trying not to be small." The line stunned even her. I watched the truth of it strike, then settle. I thought if I could make it look grand enough, it would feel like it belonged to me. And does it? She looked at the bottle, tilted in ice, throat empty, and then at the neat stack of plates, white hills in a vanished landscape. "No," she said, "it belongs to the story. He writes it, I perform it." A tear gathered, jeweled and mean, and she caught it with the back of a knuckle before it could fall. "I know what you think," she added. "You think I picked this cage. I think you polished it," I said gently, "because polishing is easier than prying open the door." Her shoulders slumped a fraction, the first true surrender of the night. "I told myself it was love," she said. "That real love comes with structure, with standards, with someone taking the burden off your hands. And maybe it does for someone, but not like this, not with receipts that feel like report cards." "Vanessa," I said, "riches that you can't touch are just museum pieces, pretty to look at, guarded by alarms." She laughed a little at that, and this time it sounded human. "You want to know the worst part?" she asked. "I almost asked you to put it on your card the minute we sat down. I thought, she wants to be here. She'll be grateful for the night. She'll just help." I told myself it was fine because he'd reimburse you, but I knew he wouldn't. Her eyes climbed back to mine. "He never reimburses anyone I bring into the story. That's my lesson. The one he says keeps me elegant. I cover my mess with goodwill, not money." There it was. The lock and the logic twisted together. I sat very still, letting the confession breathe, letting the last of the performance die. Around us, the restaurant's music shifted from strings to something slower, almost kind. The world kept eating. Our table learned to be honest. "What do you want to do right now?" I asked. Her mouth opened, closed. The answer inside her was wobbling on 2 feet it hadn't used in years. "I want to go home," she said. "Not to him, to myself. But I don't know the way." The tenderness I felt surprised me. Compassion doesn't cancel harm. It just keeps you from becoming it. "You don't have to map your whole life tonight," I said. "You just have to take back one decision." She glanced at the folder, as if the leather had become a mirror. "I don't have the card," she said. "And even if I did, he'd see it in the morning and make me pay for it another way." "Then you have 2 choices in front of you," I said. "You can decide to stay in the story and let me finance the lie, or you can decide to end the scene. I won't fund it either way." She inhaled like an athlete before a dive, eyes bright with fear and the ache of wanting to be brave. The tear she'd been escorting finally escaped, cutting a clean track through her foundation. She didn't chase it. "My riches," she said, the words slow and bitter, "are chains with better lighting." "Yes," I said, "but chains can be named, and named things can be left." She nodded once, then again, the tiniest momentum gathering. "If I ask them to split it," she said, "and if I tell them to hold the rest while I figure something out, will you think less of me?" "You'll think you told the truth," I said. "That's more than most people do in places like this." The waiter approached a final time, gentler now, as if the table itself had asked for quiet. Vanessa lifted her chin not high, not haughty, just enough to remember her own height. Her voice steadied. "Could you split the check, please?" she asked. "My friend will take responsibility for her portion. I'll handle mine in parts." He didn't blink. "Of course," he said, and the words landed like a benediction. As he moved away, she exhaled, a long shaking release that moved through her shoulders and down her arms. She looked at me, not with triumph, not with shame, just with a sober kind of gratitude that knows it has a long road home. "Thank you," she said. "I didn't do anything," I answered. "I just didn't do the wrong thing." She almost smiled. "That's more help than I'm used to." The plates on the table were suddenly just plates. The chandeliers were the only lights, the velvet ropes, props. The spell had broken, and in its wake was a woman who could finally hear her own voice. But compassion doesn't mean letting myself be used. The waiter returned with the folder, 2 slips of paper tucked neatly inside, each resting like a quiet judgment waiting to be carried out. He placed one in front of me and one in front of Vanessa, with the grace of a man who had delivered thousands of verdicts disguised as receipts. For a moment, neither of us moved. The silence at our table was louder than the laughter spilling in from the bar. I could feel the tension in the air thickening, as if the weight of the leather folder itself was pressing down on us. I opened mine first. My portion was simple: 1 glass of wine, 1 salad, 1 entree. Manageable. I reached into my bag for my card, calm, steady, certain of my choice. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Vanessa staring at her copy like it was written in a language she no longer knew. Her hand hovered over the paper, trembling as if even touching it might expose her. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, the panic rising with every passing second. Finally, she looked up, her face painted with humiliation. "You're really going to do this?" she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. "Yes," I said firmly. "I told you I would cover what I ordered, nothing more." Her eyes darted around the room, scanning the nearby tables, as if the polished strangers, sipping champagne, were all judges in a trial. She was losing. Her voice wavered. "Do you have any idea how this looks? People will think I can't afford a simple dinner. They'll think Marcus isn't providing. They'll think," her voice dropped to a thread, as if saying it any louder would make it too real. "They'll think I lied." I placed my card on top of my receipt and slid it toward the waiter, who stood waiting with the kind of patience born of countless evenings like this one. "Maybe it's time," I said softly, "for someone to think the truth." She flinched, her pride warring with her panic. I could see the tears she was fighting, the desperate need to keep her mask intact. "You're ruining my image," she whispered, as if the image itself was life support and I had just pulled the plug. "No," I replied, "I'm refusing to fund it." The words seemed to slice through her composure. She bit down hard on her lip, her hands curling into fists in her lap. For so long she had hidden behind the sparkle of her jewelry and the shimmer of her designer clothes. But in that moment, under the dim glow of the chandeliers, none of that armor mattered. She looked small, exposed, fragile. The waiter picked up my slip and card with a quiet nod. Vanessa sat frozen, her receipt still untouched before her. The moment stretched, the tension twisting tighter with every passing second. Every clink of cutlery from nearby tables felt amplified. Every burst of laughter from strangers seemed like mockery aimed directly at her. Finally, with a trembling hand, she pulled a small clutch from her side, snapped it open, and drew out a single folded bill. She laid it on top of the paper, her diamond rings catching the light as if mocking her. "That's all I have in cash," she said, her voice bitter. "He'll see it missing tomorrow." She paused, then let out a small broken laugh. "He always does." I could tell that simple act producing a single bill had cost her more than the money itself. It was the act of admitting in public that she had limits, that she was not the woman she had worked so hard to convince everyone she was. The waiter accepted it without judgment, moving away to process the payments. Vanessa slumped back in her chair, her shoulders sagging as if the performance had finally drained her dry. For the first time that night, she looked less like the woman draped in designer silk and more like someone trapped behind glass, pounding quietly for air. The proud posture, the dramatic gestures, the too loud laugh, all of it collapsed in on itself, leaving behind only a tired, cornered version of the friend I once knew. I felt no victory in that moment, only clarity. She had built her castle on sand, and I had simply refused to sink into it with her. Dignity, I realized, costs far less than submission. And for me, that was the only bill worth paying. When the waiter returned with my card, I signed my slip, slid the pen back across the table, and tucked it neatly away. Vanessa didn't look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on the half-empty glass in front of her, as though it held answers she wasn't ready to say out loud. Her fingers traced the rim slowly, over and over, like she could rub away the shame clinging to her. The dining room around us carried on. Waiters moved gracefully between tables, conversations swirled, and laughter rose and fell. To anyone else, we were just two women finishing a meal. But I knew, and she knew, that something far greater had just shifted between us. I sat back, watching her in silence, giving her the space she clearly needed, but not stepping back into the role she wanted me to play. I wouldn't comfort her with lies or pretend that nothing had happened. This wasn't a wound I could cover for her, yet was one she would have to face herself. Outside, the night waited with its cool air and unflinching honesty. I knew the truth inside the restaurant wouldn't stay trapped in those four walls. It would follow us into the darkness, pressing for the final reckoning. Because masks can only shatter once, and hers already had. We stepped out of the restaurant, the heavy oak door closing behind us with a muted thud that seemed to seal the entire evening inside. Outside, the night air greeted us with a crispness that cut through the haze of perfume wine and polished illusions. It was the kind of air that doesn't let you lie to yourself. It bites, it clears, it reminds you of what is real. Vanessa walked a half step ahead of me, her heels clicking too quickly against the cobblestones, the rhythm frantic rather than confident. Every step was sharper than the last, as if she were trying to outrun the truth that had just unfolded. The glow of the street lamps cast long shadows, stretching across the pavement like silent witnesses. She stopped suddenly beneath one of them, the light pouring down over her silk dress and glinting off her diamond earrings, but even the sparkle couldn't disguise the tension etched across her face. She spun on me abruptly, her expression torn between rage and desperation. "Do you know what you did in there?" she hissed, her voice louder than she intended, carrying into the quiet of the street. "You humiliated me, in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how small you made me look?" Her words cracked like a whip, but I didn't flinch. I had expected this, expected the anger, the need to deflect, to find someone else to blame. She wanted me to carry the weight of her shame, to take responsibility for the mask slipping. But I wasn't going to, not anymore. "No, Vanessa," I said, my voice low but steady, firm enough to cut through the night. "I didn't make you small, I just stopped helping you. Pretend you were big." The fury in her eyes blazed for a moment, then faltered. She turned her head away quickly, like the street lamp's glow was too much, like it was exposing everything she'd tried to keep hidden. Her shoulders heaved as she sucked in sharp breaths, her composure unraveling strand by strand. And then, as if all the fight in her had drained at once, her body sagged against the lamppost. The anger collapsed into exhaustion. "I hate this," she whispered, the words tumbling out with a rawness that surprised even her. Her voice was shaky, fragile, as though the confession had been rotting inside her for years and had finally forced its way out. "I hate living like this. Do you know what it's like to wake up every morning in a house that feels like a palace and still feel like a prisoner? Do you know what it's like to have closets bursting with clothes, shelves lined with handbags that cost more than some people's yearly salaries, jewelry boxes crammed with diamonds and gold, and not a single dollar that you can actually call your own?" Her words spilled faster now, jagged pieces of a truth she could no longer swallow. She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead, her manicured nails digging lightly into her skin as though she could claw the frustration out of her skull. "I thought I could make it work. I thought I could accept the rules, the restrictions, the constant watch over every little thing I do. I told myself it was worth it, that at least I'd never have to worry about bills or rent or whether the lights would stay on. I told myself that kind of security was priceless." Her hand dropped and her eyes red and shining met mine. "But it isn't security. It's suffocation. It's a cage. And every single day, the bars move closer until I can barely breathe." I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the cool night air. There was no need to interrupt. This was the first time all evening she wasn't performing, wasn't boasting, wasn't spinning illusions. This was real. She laughed bitterly, but there was no humor in it, only self-loathing. I bragged because if I said it enough, maybe I could convince myself it was true that I was happy, that I was lucky, that I had everything anyone could want. I thought if I made you believe it, maybe I'd start to believe it too. But when that bill came, when the waiter set it down, it hit me like a hammer. I don't have anything, not really, not freedom, not respect, not even my own name on a credit card. Her voice broke at that last part, and for the briefest second, I saw the girl she used to be the one before the brands, before the posturing, before the cage had closed, vulnerable, human, lost. I took a step closer, not to console her, but to make sure she could hear me clearly, without escape. Wealth isn't measured by handbags or penthouses, Vanessa. It isn't measured by cars in a garage or jewelry in a vault. It's measured by freedom, by dignity, by self-respect. Tonight proved something you've been trying to hide from everyone, maybe even from yourself. You bragged about your husband's riches, but when the waiter handed me the bill, I saw the truth. You are poorer than anyone at that table. The words landed heavy, and she staggered under their weight. Her breath caught in her chest, a sharp inhale that betrayed the wound they'd struck. She didn't argue. She didn't protest. She didn't even try to dress the truth up in excuses this time. She just stood there, silent, the night pressing around us like a witness that wouldn't let her look away. For the first time in years, her mask was gone. The diamonds glittered, the silk dress shimmered, but none of it mattered anymore. The facade had cracked wide open, and all that remained was a woman standing at the edge of a choice, finally forced to see the real price of pretending.